Well, hi everyone, welcome back to Photoshop User TV 2015. We have arrived, we're here, we're ready to go.
Rock and roll, baby.
We are, of course, brought to you by the fine folks at Kelbyone.com, who bring you, of course, the latest issue of Photoshop User magazine. There it is, photography, branding, and design. That's the cover story this time around. We all have columns in the magazine, of course. Pete and I do the Down and Dirty Tricks column, and we've got a lot of great, fantastic stuff in there. However, Pete's going to learn
I think my article's better than yours, I'm just saying.
Well, you always think that. Anyway, I am Corey Barker, one of the Photoshop guys, and I am, of course, joined by my cohort, my friend, we're friends. I like to think we are. Mr. Pete Collins. Pete, how are you?
I'm doing all right.
We're here again.
We're here again.
It feels like it was a longer break than before.
Well, that's because a lot of stuff went on in between the breaks. Yeah, it was.
We did. We had a lot of changes here. We actually all moved into one building. We were actually in two separate buildings. We are now consolidated into one building, and it's been quite an adjustment here. So we've actually had a lot of people asking, when are you guys going to get back on Photoshop User TV? Well, here we are, and we're ready to go. So I think you're going to, why don't you kick things off? We're going to dive right in, like we always do. Yes, it was.
Smooth.
I was thinking I was going to go, but I want to let Pete go first because he's awesome.
Well, one of the things you might not be aware of is that we have now revamped and kind of re-kicked off the Lightroom Killer Tips blog over on LightRoomKillerTips.com. Many of you folks know that Matt Kloskowski has gone on to work with On1 software, and we've picked up the Lightroom Killer Tips blog, and we've got postings on there every weekday, Monday through Friday. Scott, RC, and myself are posting stuff over there, so make sure you go check it out, and just some really good stuff in there. But my tip comes off of the tip that I gave on the Lightroom Killer Tips blog that a lot of people responded to and liked, so I thought I'd share that here with you as well. And it all comes down to getting the most out of your adjustment brush. Now, I come from the Photoshop world, and I love using brushes, opacity, and flow to really get a lot more control. And the problem was when I was coming over into Lightroom is that it just felt clunky. You know, I'd come in and I'd start painting in an area and it just didn't feel right. Well, I can adjust a feather and make it softer and do all that, but it just didn't have kind of those subtle nuances that I wanted because I just was mainly working with those top ones up there, and then I'd get into flow. Hey, flow. Not Flo from Mel's Diner, for you folks that are old enough to know what's going on. But what was happening is I just didn't feel like it had kind of that subtlety that I wanted, especially when working with faces and stuff like that. So that's when I started playing around with density. And density at first, I was like, why the heck are they calling it density? It feels like it should be opacity, until I realized that you're doing more than just exposure changes with the adjustment brush. You're changing the amount of whether it's sharpness, noise, all these other things. So density is really the strength of that brush. And I created, it's on the blog, but I created this little chart that kind of shows what's going on. And here you have just changing the, if you just change the density of something, it looks like you're changing just the opacity. If we're just talking about exposure, say you change the exposure slider and you want to brighten up the face or whatever, you put it up all the way up to 4 stops and you paint it across the face, and you've got a nice solid line right there. The easiest way to tell what's going on is I took the feather and took it all the way down so there's no feathering. So you can see in this chart 100%, 60, 30, 10. It really acts like opacity when you're dealing with exposure. Well, then if you switch over and start dropping the flow, I can leave the density at 100%. If we jump back over here in this middle one, the flow acts like the nozzle on a hose. It's how fast it comes out. So I did one swipe down and it's very solid. Second one gets a little lighter, and the third one gets very soft. These are at 60, 30, and 10 increments. So I'm like, okay, well, how does this play together? When you start messing with the two of them, what happens is you get a very subtle that you can build up to a solid look very easily with that brush, and you can adjust how high that ceiling goes. Think of flow as how fast it comes out, and density as the ceiling that you set for how high it raises up. And some people say, well, why don't you just, over in Lightroom, why don't you just, then you can, once you paint it, you can raise it up and down. Well, I like to work kind of fluidy. I like to have a fluid workflow. And so what I can do with this is, if we go back now, I'm going to put, I have my, all I'm doing is changing. Let's get the sharpness. Let's do this. I'm going to double click on the effects, reset everything. Now if I go over, and I'm going to crank up my exposure up to about there. I'm not going to change anything else. So now when we come down to the brush settings, I've got my size. We're going to take the feather all the way down to 0. Watch what happens. I've got 0 feather, 100% flow, and 100% density. I do that, it's a nice solid line. Take the feather all the way to 100, it's a nice soft line. One of the reasons you're getting that jaggy is I've got the auto mask on. If I turn that off, it's trying to figure out what the edges are. That's why it's got that. Now here's a nice solid line with 100% feather. All right, but now if I undo those, I go back and I take the flow, bring it down. It's nice and soft, but if I keep working it, it builds up. And it's going to build up to 100% opacity, or density in this case. But if I take the very same thing, drop the density down to say about 50%, 49, and I start doing the same thing, I will build up, but I only will hit a certain level. Now, why that's important is, let's say I'm working on this face over here. I'm working on our Jack Sparrow face over here. And I'm coming in and I want to lighten everything up, and I want to be nice and soft and kind of get his face to a base lightness. Now, once I get to a certain point that I like, there may be some places that I want to add a little extra to. I just simply bump up the density a little bit more, and I can re-hit that area and bring a little bit more lightness to it without making a global change up here with my exposure. I hope that makes sense. You're able to really fine-tune each stroke if you understand how flow and density work. And a lot of people don't, and so what happens is you get this big clunky, yeah, I've brightened it up, but his face looks like it's glowing or whatever because it's a solid, same color all the way across. If you understand how masks work in Photoshop, the same thing's really going on inside of Lightroom, it's just behind the scenes. It's creating those masks and doing all that. It's almost like you're painting and adding the stuff and everything else is masked in Lightroom, but it's all happening by these sliders and you're not having to fill with black or white. If you can get your head around that, it's the same process, and flow and density are really going to give you the opportunity to really dial that in and get the effect you want. Go in and play with it and you'll understand how it works much better, and you'll find that you'll be able to get a lot more details and a lot more precision when you're working in Lightroom. And that's my tip for today.
Very precise.
And I'm sticking with it.
Stick with it, yes. And they've really grown a lot with the paint features in Lightroom, what they've really been able to do, and the corrections. And
well, yeah, it used to just feel so clunky to come in there, so what I'd do is I'd always wait to do the highlighting and stuff and throw it over to Photoshop.
Not to mention, notice, Pete was using a tablet. So pressure sensitivity certainly can play a role in that.
Well, and I will, somebody asked about that. Does pressure sensitivity play in the adjustment brush? And as far as I can tell, I did some tests, it doesn't with the density and the flow feature. And so you want to play around with that. I still say it's the best thing to do when you're doing retouching. I like the tablet when I'm on the road or whatever, but I work on the Cintiq whenever I can because it's just phenomenal.
Well, and I think we both agree for the feel alone, because, I mean, I don't use pressure sensitivity all the time, but I'm always using my pen for all my work and everything.
Yep.
All right, let us take a quick break. We're going to come right back. I've got a cool little 3D thing coming up, and we're going to talk about a few other things, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
We all know the difference a great teacher makes. They inspire you, challenge you, and push you to do the things you never thought you could. For creatives, that means you've got to know your tools inside and out, whether it's Photoshop or photography, lighting or Lightroom, InDesign or After Effects. And while there are free videos out there, you have to watch 30 bad ones just to find a decent one. And a lot of times, the techniques are either outdated, complicated, or just plain wrong. What we need is a better way to learn. One that connects amazing teachers with creative people all over the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A thriving educational community with nothing but the most talented, engaging, and respected teachers in the industry. Then we simplify the whole learning process with short, clear, concise classes. That's exactly what we've created for you right here at Kelbyone.
Well, hi everyone, we are back here at PhotoshopUser TV. Now before I get started on my little 3D trick, I want to talk about one of the new additions to Kelbyone, and that is the Kelbyone Blog. It's our public face of our company, you can see right here. It is at kelbyone.com/blog, and it is all the newest stuff. We've got tutorials and news and all kinds of industry things, whether it's Kelbyone, Photoshop, Lightroom, photography. We're having it all here. We've got a person dedicated specifically to this site.
Julio, down by the schoolyard. We love Julio.
Julio just came on just a few weeks ago,
hair.
and he is manning the blog, so he has new stuff going up every day, so be sure to check that out every single day. There's something new to see all the time. So
that's why you need to go. Tips, tricks, all kinds of stuff right there. It's a great place to be, a great resource to find out what's going on.
Indeed. All right.
Hey, Corey.
Do
you possibly have something 3D for us?
I think we need to create a little graphic element for my 3D.
It's Corey 3D.
It's 3D time with Corey. All right, yeah, I got a texture thing with 3D, and what I like about it is being able to take textures and make them look a little bit more realistic. The thing about textures is, like, you look at a texture like this wood texture I've got on my screen right here. Let me minimize this one. And you look at it and you think, all right, it looks like a wood texture, but it doesn't actually look like it feels. Like if you touch it, it looks flat. It kind of almost like it feels it. It literally is because my screen is flat. But I want to be able to give it a little bit more grit to it. Almost have it look like as if you touched it, you would feel the roughness in there. And 3D and Photoshop's really going to give me the ability to do that. So the first thing is I'm going to go and open up my relevant panels here. Let's get the 3D panel open and the properties panel. And I'm going to turn this into a 3D postcard. So I don't need it to have any dimension, I just need it to be in a three-dimensional space with lighting and everything. So go to New Mesh from Layer under the 3D menu here and choose Postcard. You'll see no immediate change except for the fact that it is now sitting in three-dimensional space, as you can see right there. So you can move it around and everything looks really good. All right.
What's the postage for a 3D postcard?
You know, it changes every year, so. Right now it's 25 cents because it's so new. All right, so we have our text. Now I'm going to go in here into the layers because you can access the texture file within here. So I'm just going to double click on background. It opens up, similar to the way a smart object is, the original flat document here. So what I want to do is actually add a couple of lines here. Now these are going to be basically creases. I want this to look like it's like not just one big piece of wood, but perhaps a couple of boards. Have the gap in between them here.
I'm bored with it already.
Yeah, so am I. But I'm going to roughen that up a little bit. I'm just going to go into Filter, go down here to Distort and choose Ripple. And just give it a very, so you can see that little subtle ripple there. So I have it on medium and just want to give it some little rough edging there. That looks good.
I hate when you do that because that's just brilliant, you jerk.
So, and then, hey girl.
God.
I'm going to create a new blank layer, and let's give this a color, almost as if it's almost like a paint color.
I hope other people watching going, of course you'd use Ripple. It makes perfect sense, but who would have thought to use Ripple if you're not Corey Barker?
Gosh, it's what I do. All right, so I'm adding a color effect here. I'm just going to put this in multiply mode and just, kind of darken the wood there a little bit. No, lighter. There we go. So I'm going to close that, save the changes, and now you can see it updates on my image here. Now, I want to create something called a bump map. And that's going to help us give the dimension that we're looking for here. Now, what we're going to do is jump into the 3D panel, and we've got background, and if you twirl it down, it shows the one element here, which is the postcard element, that one surface. So we're going to go in here where it says bump, and I'm going to go in here and just choose Load Texture. Now there's no bump map attached to it as of yet. We're going to go ahead and add one, which is this texture file I've got right here. And again, when I talk about textures, I'm not ever concerned myself with the color of a texture. Notice it's blue and white and all these different things. That's okay. We're going to change that in a moment. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that, click Open. And we don't see an immediate change on the image. Can anyone guess why? 50 points. Too late. All right. It's because of the lighting. When you create a 3D postcard, there is no default light. It doesn't add the spotlight or any of those lights like that you normally see on a 3D object, so you have to go and add it manually. First off, however, we're going to turn off the IBL, which is by default filled with white. So just uncheck that, and everything goes dark. The lights have been turned out. Now, go and add, let's just do a simple point light here. Ah, there we are. So now as I move my light around, you'll see that bump map kind of subtly peering through there on that texture. Now what I can do is jump in to that setting where we applied the bump map. Notice that the default setting is 10. I'm going to bring that up to 45. And you'll notice the bump map get even more detail. However, let's bring this light back a little bit. Oh, I moved the wrong thing there. There we go. Slide the light back, and let's move it up here. Now I want to see that texture a bit more, so let's go. Oh, my setting changed. Did you do that?
I did.
Okay. All right, so let's go in and edit the bump map texture. Now, first thing is I'm going to remove the color. Shift-Command-U desaturates the color. Then I'm going to adjust the levels. And we're going to do it with the eyedropper tool here. I'm going to do it manually. I'm just going to make this darker. Now, darker elements of a bump map will get pushed back in space. The lighter elements tend to get pushed forward a little bit. So we want all these darker areas to look like it's kind of indented in there. So if I save, you'll notice the bump map gets a little bit rougher. However, here's the cool trick. Do a Command-A and select all on this bump map texture. Copy it to the clipboard. We're going to close, save the changes. Then we're going to go back up to the diffuse texture up here, the original texture that we opened earlier, which is, we'll just go to Edit Texture. And then we're going to paste that element in there, and then change this to multiply, and then drop the opacity a little bit. Now watch what happens when I save the changes. Voila. Now we have a difference of color. Not just a difference of bump map, you know, the roughness of it, we have a difference in color now. It really adds to that texture element a little bit more. Ah, but what did I forget? Anyone? Stunned silence. I get it, I get it.
You forgot that.
I forgot those lines. So now I'm going to open up my bump texture as well as the diffuse texture. And that layer that I've got those two black lines that I created, I'm just going to drag and drop that over. Close that, save the changes. Oop, they're off a little bit. Oh, it's offset.
You got blurred lines.
But that's okay, it actually adds a little something to it. But anyway, now if I kind of move this around, let's actually move the camera. But there you can see, it's a little bit more realistic texture on there, and I'm getting this more aged wood on there. Right. So you can take two different textures, blend them together, and through lighting and bump maps, you can get some really intense wood effects on here. Now, I will show you, where is my original? So what actually took this entire effect and ended up creating this image here. Now, that's the same wood texture. I just showed you how I created it, added a few more elements to it, but there's not one single photo, well, apart from the textures, but this is not one photo at all. It's all 3D elements created using that same texture technique I just showed you.
So to wrap up what he just said in kind of a nutshell is the whole idea on a bump map is you're creating an idea for Photoshop to look and say wherever there's a light area, try to push it forward a little bit. Wherever there's a dark area, bring it back. And then it's just applying those images onto the bump map area so that it will know where to go in and out.
Yeah, it's creating those subtle peaks and valleys in the texture to give it that. And the light reacts to that. That's the key thing, is that the light reacts to that as if it was a real object and really gives you that effect really well. And it's faking it. If you actually turn the 3D object on its side, it doesn't create any kind of extra extrusion like that. It's still flat. It's just creating the illusion based on the way the lighting is in the scene. So it's really kind of clever how it works. So there you have it.
That's great.
Yep.
Well, hey, we've got a Peachpit e-deal for you that I'm really excited about because it's our good buddy Joe McNally. And it's called Light and the Life, the field notes from a photographer. And man, what a photographer to get the field notes from.
I know, right?
We love Joe McNally. He has done so much out there. It's an ebook deal, and it is phenomenal. You need to go to peachpit.com/Kelby1, and your price is only going to be $8 if you get it. It's an ebook deal, and the thing you need to remember is that you've got to enter your code of Kelby1. So you go to peachpit.com/Kelby1, enter the code Kelby1 to get this great book for $8. It's a phenomenal book. Make sure you check it out.
Anything Joe puts out there, you really got to, even if you're a novice photographer, it's worth looking into.
Well, he's a storyteller both with his words and his photography, so when you put both of those together, they're
Indeed.
great.
If you ever go to an event, be it Photoshop World or wherever he's teaching, don't miss anything he does. Yep. He's every bit as educational as he is entertaining.
Yep.
He's the whole thing. So, all right, we have giveaways. We have a book to give away, and we have a brand new book from our good friend from across the pond. Mr. Glenn Dewis has finally released his Photoshop workbook. There it is, right there. Glenn Dewis, if you don't know, he is a phenomenal compositor and photographer over in England, and definitely, he's a big name.
He's a good guy, and he's just a good buddy. We love him to death. He's a solid individual.
There's the bag. So there's Glenn right there. See him?
And he's done some amazing stuff. He comes over, teaches Photoshop World. He's one of our guys.
Nope,
so definitely check it out. It's worth
right
it.
there. Yeah.
If you're into compositing. Really
yeah,
good
he really covers a lot of great stuff. I got a lot of this book. I thumbed through it. He's got some really superb techniques in here, and just a great guy. Be on the lookout for this because this is going to be all over the place. So be sure to check that out. But you can win this copy by going to Kelby1.com/webcast/contest and going to the Photoshop User TV. Enter your name, email, a comment, a question, a joke, a suggestion for Pete, I don't know. Anything like that. And just entering your name is enough, though. That's all it needs to be, and you will be eligible to win. Now, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, and if you don't win, go buy the book, because he owes me some money, and this way I can get some money back from him. I'm just saying.
Yes, kickbacks indeed.
Yep.
All right. Well, does that wrap it up?
I think that does.
It does, indeed. We want to thank you guys for joining us. We are back. This is episode 1 of many, so we are back. We're going to have a great year this year, so be sure to come back and join us right here on Photoshop User TV. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Corey.
Until next time.
Next time. You were phenomenal.
Thank you. I tried to be.